Hi, I'm Rusticello.
Hi, I'm Marco Polo.
So, how did you end up in here?
Flashback.
I see you have arrived to my Mongol Empire. I am Kublai Khan.
I'm Marco Polo.
I have some demands for you. I need you to tell Pope Clement IV to send 100 men to teach my people religion and science.
So much later that the old narrator got tired of waiting and they had to hire a new one.
Finally, in Europe. Time to see the Pope.
Did you set the Pope?
Yes.
He died a year ago and they haven't elected one yet.
No Pope, huh?
No, sorry.
Well, since I like you, you can stay as long as you want, and I'll give you a job in my administration.
Wow, thanks.
Much later.
I think it's time to go home. Wait, why are we stopping? Come with me, or I will kill you. Now we have gunpowder things to trade.
End of flashback.
So that is how I ended up here.
Seems like you travel a lot.
Yeah, I travel mostly in China.
Okay, so I'm a writer, and I was thinking if you let me write a book about your adventures, it will be very successful.
Sure, why not?
Meanwhile,
I, John Montecarino, shall baptize every single last one of you, because you are not children of Jesus yet. I've done lots of things here. There are many Chinese Christian communities. I am going back to Europe.
Okay.
You know, we should expand our religion to China. It's 1291, and we barely have any Christians over there.
Fine, you can go.
You know what would be helpful? Translating the Bible.
Sure, I guess.
Also, I'm going to Scandinavia and other Western countries to spread Christianity.
Finally, you have a good idea.
I also forgot to tell you, we made a deal with the Mongols to be anti-Islam so our religion can rise.
Okay.
The bubonic plague was caused by rodents, and it started in China and went all the way to Europe. And it was also called the Black Death by Europeans. And it was called like this because it gave you like this black swelling, and it caused one of the biggest demographic changes in history. It made China's population come from 85 million to 75 million in 70 years, and it caused Europe's population to drop 25%.
We're all dying, we're all dying, we're all dying!
The bubonic plague is killing us all and destroying our society.
We're all dying!
Did you heard about the riots caused by this?
Yeah, they are demanding higher wages and better work conditions.
The Renaissance is a period of time between the modern ages and the modern world. It marks a cultural rebirth, and it's so important because artists are studying light and perspective and the human anatomy. Some of the most famous works from this period of time are the Mona Lisa, the Birth of Venus, the Last Supper, and some of the most famous artists from this period of time are Leonardo da Vinci, Raphael, Michelangelo, and Donatello.
much later.
I have dedicated my whole entire life to the Muslim religion, so I think you people should hear out my opinion.
Sure, let's hear it.
I think that there should be a way that both woman and man should act towards each other, and I believe that women should be more discreet.
Thanks for spreading our religion. You'll be serving as a counselor for our government.
Start.
I've decided I want to create a new empire after the ones fell.
And do you have anything planned?
It's going to be called Ming because it's going to be brilliant.
Okay.
I'm joking that it's going to be the name, but I do have a few ideas.
Okay, so tell me about them.
Well, I don't want any Mongol influence, and I want a Confucian-based government.
Hello, my name is Isaac Newton, and I will be introducing you to Europe during the 14th and 15th centuries.
I am Martin Luther, and I wrote the 95 Theses condemning the Roman Catholic Church for its abuses, and I spread them throughout Europe. It was really successful in Germany, and I got half of the population to convert into Lutheran Christianity. But throughout Europe, it has started a movement suppressed by church.
My name is Henriette, King of England, and I wanted to divorce my wife because she couldn't have any children, but the Pope didn't let me, so I decided to separate the state from the Roman Church and unite it with my own church where I was a Pope. Since the Roman Catholic Church was so important during 1545 to 1563, the Council of Trent was created, and it consisted of bishops and other important high-ranking religious officials to discuss Roman theology. Church also had other Jesuits. As a good Jesuit that I am, I have my advanced education in philosophy, language, and history. I just promote things that benefit the Roman Catholic Church, and I am responsible to attract as many foreign conversions as I can. Jesuits had a big role on the expansion of Christianism. Another important thing the church did during this time period was killing more than 60,000 people because they thought they were witches. I wanted my Bohemian people to return to the Roman Catholic Church, but apparently you can force someone to believe in a religion. And in Spain, France, Poland, Sweden, the Netherlands, Germany, Russia, and Sweden ended up involved on the most destructive war before the 20th century. But before this war, the Holy Roman Empire was really expanded.
I am Charles V, and I was born with Austrian territories, and during my reign I expanded the Holy Roman Empire toward Germany, Bohemia, Switzerland, and northern Italy.
A couple years after Charles V's death, Galileo Galilei was born. I discovered that the sky was not heaven as George said, but it was full of planets, and I made some other scientific discoveries that got me killed by the Roman Catholic Inquisition. The first Inquisition was the Spanish, created by Ferdinand and Isabel of Spain. They killed anti-church protesters and investigated for secret practice of Judaism or Islam, and also killed many scientists for being considered witches. Talking about scientists, let's talk about me. I created the theory of gravity thanks to an apple and the book of Principles of Natural Philosophy, which are really important nowadays. Other very influential people were Enlightenment thinkers. My name is Voltaire, and due to my ideas of state being separated from church, many countries in the Americas adopted this way of government. My name is John Locke, and I created the phrase life, liberty, and property, which would be later changed by Thomas Jefferson, who said life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness as principle for the United States.
My name is Jean-Jacques Rousseau, and I created the social contract that inspired many revolts and reforms throughout Europe, but mostly important, the French Revolution.
That's my summary about Europe during the 14th and 15th centuries. And remember, kids, it's always good to see apples fall.
I'm here to interview you about life during the Industrial Revolution. So, why did you move to the city?
So when I was little, my mom told me it was because we needed a better life, and indeed we needed a better life. But it was mainly because there were a lot of farmers, so the farm business wasn't really going well. We had so many crops, and we were selling nothing. So we moved to the city, and because it was a new life, a new opportunity. But I mean, we were working like slaves, but we were given a new home, a little home. But yeah, we were working like slaves, but that's what we could do to survive.
So, you were saying you worked like slaves. So, what were the working conditions?
So I started working when I was like 6. The shifts were from Monday to Saturday. We had the only free day we had, it was Sunday, because we went to church. The shifts were minimum 12 hours if we were lucky. From 6 to 6. My mom used to work at a weaving factory. I worked with her. My dad used to work at a coal mine. Since I was little, my supervisor made me work at small places in small spaces, fixing things, which was really dangerous since I was barefoot, so I didn't have any kind of protection. My mom didn't have any kind of protection either, but her work wasn't as dangerous. And my dad, who used to work at the coal mines, wasn't given any protection. He could take his own, but we were poor, so he didn't have money to buy some. So those were the working conditions. Those were really dangerous.
So you were saying the working conditions were terrible. So and there was a group called the Luddites. Do you remember them?
I do remember them. The first thing I remember of them, like knowing about them, it's that they were killed by the British government. So I remember they destroyed like the machinery from the places they used to work to in a strike to get better working conditions, which is a good thing. But that shows how the British government wanted to keep the working conditions as bad as they could to keep a greater income. So I do think they made a change, like they sparked the flame to get better working conditions, but it's a shame that they were killed by the British government.
So when the new machinery was introduced, did it make your work any easier?
So I remember my mom talking about John Kay doing the flying shuttle. I remember coming home and saying that it made her work really easy. I remember then, I think Samuel Crompton adapted the thing for steam power in 1779. That wasn't really efficient for us, but more for the factory owner, because it made work cheaper. I remember Edmund Card doing the water-driven power loom in 1785. I remember my dad talking about it, but I don't recall anyone else talking about it. And I remember going to the first to see the first steam power locomotive created by George Stephenson in 1829. That thing could reach up to 45 kilometers per hour. Those new inventions were really important at the time, really impressive, because there was nothing like it. It was the first time the world saw something like that.
So changing the topic, what is your opinion on Karl Marx?
So I remember him. I remember when I was a little older, his book came out. I think it's called The Communist Manifesto. Yeah. I remember the impact it did on the people who work at the factory. I remember someone saying, "Why if we're working here like slaves and we barely have money, why is there people who are doing nothing, having much more money than us?" And I think that showed the impact of his book on normal people like us, like how his idea of a different kind of government impacted each one of the poor people that I used to work with. And yeah, he had revolutionary ideas, but they never really made an actual impact on society. They just sparked more ideas.
Thank you for this interview. It was really nice to meet you.
Thank you for letting me tell my story. I was a Nazi officer during the time of Nazi Germany. I remember when Hitler came into power in 1933. It was mainly because of the public discontent caused by the Treaty of Versailles after the Great War. He called the signing of the Treaty of Versailles a November crime, and one of the first things he did was he undid the Treaty of Versailles. He had really strong opinions. He was against Jews, communists, liberals, and everyone who wasn't a perfect German. He made an alliance with Italy because they had a similar government, so he could trust Mussolini. He withdrew Germany from the League of Nations in 1933, and his main goal supposedly was to make a Germany for Germans and to reunite all Germans into a single homeland. Italy was part of the Axis. I remember that Mussolini promised glory to Italy by conquering new places. He conquered Ethiopia in 1935, and in 1936 he annexed Libya, creating an overseas empire. He used excessive use of force, killing 275,000 Ethiopians, and well, again, he joined the Axis in 1938. And after the Nazi Germany conquered over France, he realized Germany was winning the war and the partnership was worth it. So that was how Italy and Germany joined and did a partnership. One of the first things Hitler wanted to do under his rule was to conquer Czechoslovakian territory that actually belonged to Germany before the Great War, and he did. Britain and France didn't even say nothing because they didn't want to risk their military to protect Czechoslovakian territory. But then they did the Munich Conference in September of 1938. At this conference, they created the appeasement. Actually, Neville Chamberlain created it to supposedly appease Hitler, but Hitler refused to be part of it, and he invaded Czechoslovakia the next year and threatened to invade Poland. And when it seemed like there was not gonna be peace at the time in Europe, Germany and the Soviet Union created the Russian-German Treaty of Non-Aggression. That was a sign of peace. On June 1941, Hitler gave the order to invade the Soviet Union. He assembled the most powerful invasion in human history with 3.6 soldiers. I was one of them. 37,000 tanks and 2,500 planes. The invasion took Stalin and the Red Army by surprise, and by December of 1941, Germany already had the Russian heartland, and it seemed like it's an easy victory for Germany. But then winter came, and Germany wasn't prepared for it. The Soviets were. They manufactured the boots and all the winter clothing in the US, but Germany wasn't prepared. So thousands of soldiers had to be amputated, and many were killed by the cold. But during the spring, we won the advantage again on the Soviet territory. But by 1943, the Germans lost the momentum in the Soviet Union, and the Soviet Union retook their territory. In April of 1940, Germans occupied Denmark and Norway, and then they launched a full-scale attack on Western Europe. They used blitzkrieg tactics against Belgium, Netherlands, France, and the Allies, but the French signed an armistice in June of 1940, leaving Britain alone against the German forces. Germans launched the Battle of Britain. They sent a rain of bombs in highly populated areas that killed more than 40,000 British civilians. But then Hitler abandoned his plans to invade Britain. In this period of time, Japan had a military government who thought they were racially superior and wanted a nation for Asians. So in 1931 to 1932, they conquered Manchuria. The League of Nations wasn't really happy at it, so they retreated from it in 1933. By December of 1937, they conquered Shanghai and Nanjing, and for the following 6 months, they had nothing but victories. They usually bombed urban centers, and they killed 10,000 people in Shanghai due to this. In 2 months, Japanese soldiers raped 7,000 women, killed 100,000 men, and burned 1/3 of Nanjing homes at the rape of Nanjing. This Japanese aggression aroused Chinese nationalism, and in September of 1937, Chinese nationalists and communists united to do a united front policy with an army of 7 million people, which failed to win, but did make an impact on the Japanese army, but did not kick the Japanese out of China. When Japan invaded French Indochina, the United States responded by putting an embargo in oil and freezing their assets in the United States. This embargo was supported by Great Britain, the Commonwealth of Nations, and the colonial independent government of Dutch East Indies, but this did not make Japan accede the United States' demands. And in October of 1941, General Toyo Hideki assumed office as Japan's prime minister and set plans for war against Britain and the United States. Japanese hoped to destroy the American naval capacity with an attack in Pearl Harbor, and on December 7, 1941, Japanese pilots sank 18 ships and destroyed more than 200 ships. And on December 11, 1941, Hitler and Mussolini declared war to the U.S., but the U.S., Great Britain, and the Soviet Union came together against the Axis. After Pearl Harbor, Japan swept one victory after another. Attacks on the Philippines, Wake Island, Midway Island, Thailand, Hong Kong, and British Malaysia. Next year, they captured Borneo, Burma, and Dutch India. The US had a weapon operation called Magic, which enabled a cryptographer monitoring Japanese radio frequencies to discover the Japanese attack on Midway. On June 4, 1942, 36 dive bombers attacked Japan fleet, sinking 3 Japanese carriers in a 5-minute strike, and other 4 later in the day. The Allies also adopted an island-hopping strategy. In February 1945, there was a British firebombing that killed 135,000 people. And on April 30, Hitler and more Nazis committed suicide. Until May 8, 1945, Germany finally surrendered. In August 6 and 9, 1945, the United States atomic bomb against Hiroshima and Nagasaki killed upward 200,000 people. The Soviet Union declared war on Japan on August 8, 1945. This new threat, combined with the devastation of the bombs, made the Emperor Hirohito to surrender against the US on September 2, 1945.
In Germany, Hitler was put in power in 1933, which he discriminated Slavs, Gypsies, homosexuals, and Jehovah's Witnesses, but mostly he discriminated Jews. He sent troops and military troops to European territories, and the troops were called Action Squad. On January 20, 1942, he made all Jews to evacuate from Germany, and they were sent to concentration camps. The most important one was Auschwitz. In total, they were killed more than 5.7 million Jews.
After World War I, the Treaty of Versailles was created, and in 1999, it was signed. This meant that Germany owed $33 billion in cost of war damages. However, Germany was going through their very own depression and was struggling to pay for the money for the treaty. However, once Hitler came into power, he was able to alleviate these issues by creating economic policies. The United States, in 1939, the United States implemented a policy called the cash and carry policy. This meant that Britain and other European countries came in and paid for us, and we supplied them with war goods, and they themselves went over to take the supplies to their country. In 1941, the U.S. implemented a lend and lease policy, which meant that the U.S. lent, or basically just traded, United States war goods and things like that to European countries, and in exchange, we got naval bases. In 1940, the Germans became victorious over the French and the Dutch. Japan, seeing this, wanted a piece of all the action. So with the Vichy government by their side, they sailed to Southeast Asia and started taking over Indochina. However, the United States did not like none of this, and they put an embargo on oil and froze the Japanese assets. After the World War II ended and the Allies came victorious, many countries were going through economic hardships. This man, named George C. Marshall, came up with a plan called the Marshall Plan to help aid European countries by giving them $13 billion to help aid with the reconstruction of their economies.
My name is Pablo Picasso and I'm going to be talking to you about art during World War II. So in World War II, art was mainly used for propaganda and many anti-Nazi artists were killed. And one of the main pieces during this period of time was Guernica, painted by me, Pablo Picasso, since it showed how brutal Nazis were since in Guernica's bombing, they killed a lot of innocent people.
During World War II, American life changed to the benefit of conserving materials and making them. One big change was involved with fashion. To conserve wool and cotton, dresses became shorter and vests and cuffs disappeared. An even bigger change was the increase in mobility. Farm families and small-town families were now living in large urban areas. Urbanization basically stopped during the Depression, but during the war, the amount of people living in cities leaped, which increased the production in factories. The war also affected women. There was a large number of women in uniform either for nursing in the military branches or non-combat jobs. Women even substituted on the home front in businesses, factories, and etc. On the other side of the ocean, the change in society was not beneficial at all. People were either building bomb shelters, rationing food they could find, sending their children to safer countries, or anything to survive and last out the drastic effects the war has had on them.
The League of Nations is a group of countries that come together to try to prevent war from happening, and they try to settle things using negotiation. One of the wars that they did try to stop was the war between Japan and China, but it didn't really work. Nationalists and communists formed the United Front, which was an alliance of groups against their common enemies. In 1940, Japan formed the Triple Pact with Germany and Italy so they can become allies, and in 1941, Japan also signed the Neutrality Pact with the Soviet Union so they could not engage in any military action against each other. The Germans invaded the Soviet Union using the Blitzkrieg strategies, which was when they used offensive weapons such as tanks, planes, and artillery, but it didn't really work in Russia. On August 1945, atomic bombs were dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki, which killed at least 200,000 citizens. Adolf Hitler used the Holocaust as a way to separate the Jews and what he called pure Germans. He also blamed the Jews for how Germany lost World War I. The women played major roles in the war, however, it was only temporarily. While the men were at war, the women took their jobs. The enunciation of the Truman Doctrine on March 12, 1947, crystallized the new U.S. perception of a world divided between free and enslaved peoples. The creation of the U.S.-sponsored NATO and the Soviet-controlled Warsaw Pact signaled the militarization of the Cold War.